Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy. How's Brian Kelly doing today? Where's his mood as he enters a spring football up here in Baton Rouge?
He seemed to be in a pretty good mood yesterday. They've obviously had a busy off season. I was like, have you had any off season whatsoever? And he said there was about 7 days in there where he was able to maybe relax a little bit, but they've been busy. And at this point, they're now back in the building. Have been for maybe a week or two now here with kind of everybody back, finally back with the players and gearing up towards spring practice, which is going to be an intriguing one here for LSU.
No question about it. Always intriguing when there's a new quarterback showing up on the scene. And we saw Garrett Nussmeier obviously in the ReliaQuest Bowl, and the numbers were great that day, and LSU got the desired result. But you spoke to Brian Kelly about Garrett Nussmeier. Where do you think the program's confidence is in Nuss?
It's high. They think that he can be really, really good, and there's just a few things it seems like that he needs to clean up in order to maybe be one of those top 5 quarterbacks in the SEC and be someone who can truly lead an offense throughout an entire season. We've seen it in bits and spurts from Garrett, and in the postseason in 2022, and then in the bowl game, of course, in his first start. And there was a lot of good things to pull away from that. The next thing that he needs to do is just get a little bit more consistent. Garrett's completion percentage over the course of his 3 years is under 60%. He's thrown 7 interceptions in 219 attempts, and LSU just wants him to get a little bit more consistent. That's going to come through working on his patience in the pocket and as he's going through his progressions. Brian Kelly said that Garrett has a tendency sometimes to bail a little bit early and abort. They want him to hang in there just a little bit longer at times. And the other, because he has so much arm talent. And if he can just fully harness that, then they think he can be really, really good. During spring practice, another consistency thing that came up with Garrett from Brian was just that consistency in practice every single day. Garrett's always tried to bring that and act like a starter, but it's a little bit different when you're actually the guy. And so the offense is going to go as he does, and LSU wants to see him lead that consistently every single day.
How important was the bowl game, both for the way the staff feels about Garrett and then just for Garrett individually with how he must feel after having a real game to get ready for?
Oh, it was vital. I mean, to be able to go out there, throw for 395 yards, 3 touchdowns, only the 1 interception, and then lead that 98-yard drive at the end certainly put a lot of confidence in what Garrett is capable of heading into the offseason. Obviously, LSU had already at that point brought in A.J. Swan as the Vanderbilt transfer. But it's really going to be up to A.J. whether or not that becomes a quarterback competition, because Garrett's going to be your starter going to spring practice and your presumed starter against USC in the bowl game. It would kind of be like it was last year with Jayden coming back as a starter. It was only going to be a competition if Garrett could really make it one, or if Jayden's play really fell off. And this is kind of the same situation from the looks of it. Garrett's going to be the guy going to the spring, and because he had such a positive first start, there's a lot of confidence in him going into these practices.
I think of Brian Kelly as kind of a CEO, but we do know that he is an offensive guy first and does sit in on all those offensive meetings. With Mike Denbrock and Jayden Daniels gone, but Joe Slow and Garrett Nussmeier remaining, and Brian Kelly obviously remaining, how much different should this offense look, if at all, next year?
The major difference is going to come in the run game. In the passing game, Kelly said yesterday, you would be hard-pressed to really notice any differences. It's going to be kind of subtle. And basically based more on what the personnel is. But schematically in the run game, it sounds like it's going to be completely different because you don't have Jayden Daniels' legs. You can't run the same kind of zone reads that you did last year and everything that built off of that in terms of inside zone. LSU was such a heavy inside zone read team last year, and so much of it was Jayden Daniels. With him gone, there's going to be under center at times. There'll be tosses. There'll be counters and pulling guards and maybe pulling tackles. Like there's going to be a lot more variety in the run game outside zones that we didn't see a whole lot of last year, and in the overall number of touches is going to go back toward being heavily on the running backs. Brian Kelly said that LSU, I think the running backs touched the ball about 257 times last year. He estimated that this year will be up to 375, and that's makes a lot of sense when you take Jayden Daniels out of the offense, and LSU's going to have to continue to adapt to that.
Chatting with Wilson Alexander, LSU football reporter over at The Advocate. You can read his story up at theadvocate.com about his sit-down with Brian Kelly getting ready for spring football down here in Baton Rouge. You mentioned heavier workload for the running backs, Wilson. With Trey Holly's suspension, that room looks a little bit thin. What's the plan there?
Well, in the spring, there's going to be some walk-ons who have joined the team who are going to help just kind of divvy up the touches because Josh Williams Brian Kelly said has a little bit of wear and tear and tendonitis on his knee, and so they're going to be careful with him. He might be a little bit limited at times, and you don't want to overwork Caleb Jackson. Caleb Jackson now is going to be a huge part of the offense the next year. We all saw that coming, but Brian Kelly kind of was talking about that a little bit yesterday too, that he's really going to be a feature piece of this offense, and you don't want to wear him out in spring necessarily and have him do too much. So they're going to have to balance that. Because they're really only going to have the 2 scholarship running backs in the spring. It doesn't seem like Trey Holly will be back in the spring, and who knows how long that legal process is going to take to play out. And with Caden Durham not getting here until the summer, it's going to be those 2 scholarship backs and some walk-ons kind of divvying up the touches. But because of that, we are, I think, going to get a really good look at Caleb Jackson as he goes into his second year.
Let's move over to the defense. I know you discussed that at length with Brian Kelly as well, and pretty much all the defensive talk is surrounding defensive tackle. And you lost Mekhi Wingo, you lost Mason Smith, potentially could have had both of them back. You get neither. What's the plan there?
Well, at the moment, Kimo Makinioli is going to move over from the offensive line. He's a 6'4", 310-pound player who only played in 9 games over the last 3 years. So, while he might have been on the 2 deep for this offensive line because of his experience, makes sense that he would be kind of the one to flip over. I think he played a little bit of defensive line in high school as well. And so that gives LSU 5 scholarship defensive tackles here in the spring with Guillory, Sean Washington, Demirion Johnson, Jalen Lee, and now Kimo. But they've also got some walk-ons there. But that's kind of just the situation they're going to have to use to get through the spring. And then we'll see what they're able to do in the spring transfer portal window, because it feels like they're going to really have to go after some defensive tackles in that window there. The other thing to look out for is, maybe some defensive ends getting some playing time on those inside shades. No, nothing like a nose guard, but, those 3 technique, 5 technique kind of players. Ahmad Burrow is a name that Kelly mentioned as probably getting some snaps inside. And it'll be interesting to see. Kelly didn't mention this or say anything about this, but it will be interesting to see if anybody else does some of that here during the spring.
I feel like we've all got a pretty good handle on what the December and January transfer portal look like. There's a lot of activity, a lot of people moving around. What do we expect in the spring? A lessened out? What do we expect in the spring?
Yeah, it's going to be hard to gauge. I think we'll probably get a little bit more of a sense over the next month, but it's going to be really interesting to see it play out, because in the first few years of the transfer portal, that spring window has never been nearly as active as the December window. And it probably still won't be the same sheer number of people, but this is the first, kind of probably the latest hiring cycle that we've had. I mean, with Nick Saban retiring in Alabama and Jim Harbaugh leaving Michigan, and the trickle-down effect of so many things. I mean, Del McGee just now getting hired at Georgia State. There could be a lot of movement in the spring transfer portal window, but it's hard to say exactly how much there is, or how much there will be. But I would expect there to be probably more than there has been in years past, because you had so many coaches changing in January.
Let's talk about defensive backfield. We know it was bad 4 months for that crew. Numbers-wise, they're fine. It may just be an issue of talent and production and then scheme. What does Kelly feel about his defensive backfield at this point?
Well, we didn't get into that specifically yesterday, but going back to what he talked about, I guess this was maybe in December or so, around signing day, he has a lot of confidence in the cornerback room at that time, and it's because, like you said, LSU has some numbers there now, and some guys who are coming back instead of having to reload through the transfer portal. This is going to be a wide open competition, though, going throughout the spring and the off season. Zy Alexander, we learned yesterday, is going to be full go for summer workouts. That's the expectation. And then that sets him up and puts him on track to be a full participant when preseason camp opens. And he was the only player who was kind of mentioned on any sort of injury designation yesterday. But he's going to be available probably come preseason camp in August. And that's a guy who started 8 games last year. So you won't have maybe a full picture of the cornerback room coming out of spring without him being in there. But you will be able to get a sense of, Jair Brown, Ohio State transfer, J.K. Johnson, who missed all of last season, of course. I think we'll be able to get a really long look at them. And someone like P.J. Woodland is an early enrollee who's going to be interesting to keep an eye on to see what he can do as a freshman. Because, I think LSU feels better about the room than it probably did a year ago. But like you said, is that talent going to be there? They don't even themselves probably know at this point, because they got to get out on the field and see it.
Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.